I would say you, Dan Slott, and Chip Zdarsky are the funniest writers, bar none. The witticism of Bryan Q. Miller. We are here today to talk about life, love, and the pursuit of happiness, but specifically Multiverses, which when I first saw you post that it was going to be you and Dan Mora, who is one of my favorite artists.
He's awesome.
I almost dropped my phone because I was like, how is this possible? The peanut butter and the chocolate going together? How could it be?
Well, and like he takes notes like a champ, like he's a total pro. Like it was totally, and not that like there were many notes to give because this stuff's awesome, but like covers have to go through approval process, and it's like, oh, can this character be on it? Especially with something like Multiversus, where there's so many different, as I'm sure we'll talk about, different kinds of ways you can use different characters that outside of that video game. But it's like, oh, no Wile E. Coyote on this one, okay. And then like 3 hours later, there would be. He might be tiny in the back, but he wasn't like up front anymore. He was great. Dan was fantastic.
Man,
and then
great.
John, who did the art on the inside, John Samariva, who I'm buds with now too. He did all of our inside stuff, and he's pretty awesome too.
And I'm glad you pronounced his name because I was going to butcher it. So yes, we got Dan Moore on covers, John Samariva, Samari.
I've never said it out loud before. I think that's the first time. It's fine. John will forgive us. He's Australian, so I'm sure worse things have been said.
Yes, he did the interiors. Matt Herms was the colorist, and Marshall Dillon on the letters. This book that we're talking about today, Multiverses, I gotta say, I try to put my Bryan Q. Miller love aside. When I read something Bryan Q. Miller, when I know he's working on it, I try to say, okay, I need to be impartial. I know he's put me in a comic before. He's a great guy, but when I was reading Multiverses, I was like, this is Vector catnip. This is perfect for me because I'm a huge video game player. I grew up on Looney Tunes, obviously my comic book connection, So all of these things together, it was like, this is the perfect mixture of everything that I love and everything that I like. So I'm actually curious, when you got the call that you were going to be doing this, were you drawn to it because you like video games, because you like Looney Tunes, Warner Brothers? How did you get the interest to do this book?
I think it was a mix of those things. Katie Kubert, who's my editor on this, who I've known for a very long time because she way back in the day was with Mike Siglane editing my Batgirl. And I've done a few little things for her, kind of flamed out. So like we were like, what are we going to do that's actually going to stick? And she was like, yeah, we've got 2 video game projects coming up. I can't say what they are yet, but would you be interested in doing a comic for one? And so, I go to IGN and I start looking around like, okay, well, what's coming up? And so it's like Suicide Squad killed the Justice League and Multiverses. And so I'm like, ooh, if it's Suicide Squad, that's cool. I've never written them before. And she's like, and it's the one with Bugs Bunny. And so like, you know what? That's okay. So I get to write Superman and Batman in it. But like the appeal of it, I think, like it's just a bunch of people I've never gotten to write. Like that's something where it's like, I'm not going to have another opportunity to do. I'm looking at the cover of the trade right here, like Steven and Garnet. Like it's just not. And I know according to people online, I got some Garnet stuff right because she never asked questions, I guess. And I had her ask the question, and I was like, I've watched a lot of Steven Universe. I never picked up on that, but that's fine. But it was a chance to just kind of have fun with all of that stuff and also just kind of mix in a little bit of, and there's less of it, which we can talk about at some point. But so a little bit of like metatextual Grant Morrison-y stuff in there, just where it's like, oh, and this is a game within a universe, but is that within someone else's context? So a lot of that had to be kind of trimmed out, but I think I even name dropped him at one point. Rick was in it much, much more at one point. And so there was a very nihilistic monologue Rick had at one point where he just gets frustrated and says like, who knows if we're all even just like a figment of Grant Morrison's like imagination or whatever. It just like logistically, like we couldn't fit everybody in it. Like there were so many more characters. Like I've got the Adventure Time guys on the cover too, and like Tom and Jerry and stuff. And there's just not like I got to write Scooby and Shaggy, which really for me is fine. They were
great. Yeah. Yes, that was like one of my favorite standout moments was all the Scooby and Shaggy, like the Scooby talk, like the ruh-roh, like all of that stuff was great. And then like I didn't know that I needed Bryan Q. Miller writing Bugs Bunny, but it fit perfectly. You got his voice down.
Well, it's interesting. I got to go back and watch a bunch of Looney Tunes stuff that I haven't watched, but like old Looney Tunes stuff, like edgy old Looney Tunes stuff, and which I hadn't done in a long time, which was really fun. And then I'm like, Jesus Christ, I was watching this when I was 4. Like, it's like, okay, all right, like really like over and over watching it when I was 4, like going back to him. And then it's a weird thing, which I didn't realize until I got to the issue where I got to write Harley and Ivy, which is also like a big, super privilege honor, but how similar Bugs and Harley are. Like, because they really like just in the way they talk and how they talk, and like there's a little bit more of Deadpool to Bugs, I think, than there is to Harley, but it depends on the comic that you're reading. But I was just like, oh yeah, and I need to make a conscious effort to make sure that I don't have them both talking in the same panel, because then they're just going to sound identical. Yeah.
Yeah, that is great. I didn't even put that together, but that is 100%. There is that similarity between the two. And again, you knocked it out of the park on both characters. Like, that was another one with the Harley and Ivy stuff. I was like, recently the Harley Quinn show has been influenced. I haven't been keeping up on a lot of the Harley comics, but the Harley Quinn show on Max is like, when I think in my mind, her talking, and that's what the one that I'm hearing now. And it's so interesting to see her character arc and evolution over from Batman the Animated Series up to Harley Quinn. Like, she's been so flexible and malleable, and very kind of similar to Batman. Like, she works in all these different contexts, but then DC has also allowed her to grow, to get away from Joker and become her own character in person. So all of that stuff, man, you did a fantastic job of fitting her in. And that's a question that I had, is what was that process like of, okay, I have to fit in Steven Universe, I have to fit in Rick and Morty. Like, what was that process for you? Did you just have a spreadsheet of, okay, here's all the people I need, and here's all the story beats that I have?
It was even more ridiculous than that at first. Because there were spreadsheets, because this comic was done, I think, before the game went offline the first time, when they decided it was just a beta, but like no one was told it was a beta, but apparently it was a beta. And so we went to great editorial lengths to try and line up who debuted at which point in which issue with when that character was going to drop in the game. So like when Joker pops up right in the run, that was going to be timed out so that issue came out on Tuesday, and then Wednesday he drops in the game, and there was going to be like a promotional code in the comic that takes you to the game with maybe some skins or something. And it just, the delay after delay after delay. And so that's why we're like, yeah, look at what will be in the game, right? It says so. She's on a spreadsheet. Here we are. And she's not in the game yet, but she's got to be, right? Scooby's got to be in the game, right? Because he's in the comic. Well, at the time, yeah, Scooby was going to be in the game. So it was a lot of that stuff, just back and forth. And the only one that really affected anything was Rick, because we had much more Rick, and then there were some usage issues. He's got the Rick and Morty D&D comics with Oni and stuff. Like, so it's video game rights versus comic rights, and then getting into the nitty gritty, which was interesting because I haven't had to do that before, of like with the lawyers of like, well, he can be on one page and he can't speak. So then I'm like, well, then how am I supposed to? So that's why we do the security monitors, because it's on panels, but it's on one page and it's in one image, but I give you a 9-panel story that tells a little bit of what I wanted Rick to do. But that was kind of really just the trickiest part, because everything else really just kind of, like a lot of his stuff, we were able to at least slide in through Brainiac, who was able to put in being like possessed with Rick's ghost or whatever, with Rick information. So that was kind of our way of trying to bandage up the patient when that had to change, because I want to say I was almost done with all 6 when it was like, by the way, no Rick. So then I was like, oh, what? Who? What? Hey? And so we had to go back. So 1, 2, and 3 weren't affected, but 3 was definitely affected. 1 and 2 weren't affected. 3 was affected the least, but 4, 5, and 6, it was a much heavier Rick presence that had to get trimmed down.
Yeah. It's so interesting to hear the behind the scenes, because as you're reading it, you're not aware of that. If you're going to be reading it in trade, you're not going to get the same, like as it was being released, like, oh, okay, at this time, this is happening in the real world, and that synergy and that back and forth, it kind of feels similar to how the MCU is trying to be like, okay, well, this is happening in the movie, and then this show is happening at the same time on Disney Plus, and then that just all kind of went away.
That's a logistical nightmare. That's why, I mean, I think, right, because of delays and stuff in this last season of What If, there's like a bunch of Ironheart. There's a bunch of Riri Williams.
Yeah.
And that show has not aired yet, but I
Right.
assume that's why that was there, because it was supposed to capitalize on, well, we've got her in the live action here, we'll have her in the animation here, but Ironheart Fever, we haven't gotten the bug yet.
And COVID, like you said, the writer's strike, like a lot of things push things back, and you never know what's going to happen in the real world. So it's like the best laid plans are always, one day we'll get that perfect synergy. But the Multiverses game, I'm not a huge like Super Smash Brothers fan, that style of game, but I like
Terrible at them.
different.
I'm terrible at them.
Yeah, I'm also
I'm like,
the
why
worst.
why is there a percentage? What does the percentage mean? And what's, yeah, I don't.
Yes, I'm getting knocked off the side of the map. But the thing that I like about those games is, I was thinking about it as I was reading this. The same thing I like about what drew me to Fortnite was the licensed characters and kind of, I can be Batman, I can be Venom, I could be Spider-Man. Like there's so many, and I have so many interests. One day I'm RoboCop and one day I'm Rick Sanchez. So
Yeah.
being
It's
able
toy
to
box.
play in that, yeah, right. That bringing that to life is so fun. And I think that's what this comic feels like. There's so many different, like I said, I grew up on Looney Tunes. And actually it was interesting because right before I knew that you were going to come on for this, I had been playing Looney Tunes for my son. And he's, like you said, you were watching it when you were 4. He's about 3 right now. He's about to turn 4. And obviously he doesn't understand a lot of the context, but yeah, I'm kind of like, hey, maybe he shouldn't be watching those parts. But for the most part, like he's liking the characters and the silly things that are happening, Roadrunner and Coyote. So he's in the making of a Looney Tunes fan. But I liked that when I was growing up, more than Disney, more than anything else, I was like a Looney Tunes guy.
Yeah,
so
me too.
this brought it out. Like, oh man, I remembered, because I think I'm like you. I hadn't watched it in a while, and especially like you said, like the older ones.
There's way more shotgun stuff than I remembered. Like a lot more shotgun stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
Like uncomfortably, like shotguns up noses and stuff. And you're like,
yeah. In 2025, and also we're parents now, like it's so different experiencing it. So that part is funny, but it's still, the Looney Tunes have been around for so long. And I think that was like their appeal in Space Jam of, oh yeah, there's these wacky characters and there's Michael Jordan and there's LeBron James, or, whatever it is. They've had this lasting appeal on pop culture. And this comic, I thought that you really did a great job of kind of infusing all of them in there. What are your thoughts on the multiverse in general? Like, do you like multiverse stories as a consumer?
I think it depends. I think it can be a very big rut that doesn't necessarily always hold up everything you need it to. Because once you start to pull the thread and really sit down and think about it, it's such a big, unwieldy concept.
Right. Yep.
That then suddenly, and which is part of which I guess another part of that Rick Sanchez monologue I had to cut with the nihilism was like, well, nothing matters because everything exists. Every configuration of everything, like,
right,
it's everywhere, so nothing is special. And I think there is a danger to that, but then like used sparingly. Like I think in the kind of the 2-part finale of Lower Decks that wrapped it all up, it was used to great effect. But I did like when the Multiverses idea started popping up this season, I was like, oh god, okay, all right. And I wrote multiverse stuff, but it at least wasn't getting into, which I think is where it can get a little bit confusing, where it's like, okay, it's Batman, there's a cowboy Batman, or like the Deadpool thing. We're in Deadpool 3.
Yep.
There's all the different Deadpools. And so it's like, well, then which one am I? They're all essentially Deadpool. Then why are all of those Deadpools aligning against this Deadpool if they're basically the same Deadpool? And then it gets, I think, murky. But with this one, we at least used it to bring different people together versus variations. So I think that more than anything, we just kind of played around with their Earth and their worlds, but not like, oh, what made their world different from this world is that this happened or this happened. It's just like, nope, there's a world where that happens, and they're now stuck in the DC universe versus everywhere else.
I highly recommend anyone who is listening to this or watching this, please go check out Multiverses. You will have a great time, especially if you're in kind of the same age bracket as me, the wheelhouse of Looney Tunes, DC, video games, all of these things just come together and really, like I said, they make it something special. The sum of its parts is what really elevates this work. So I have just take my hat off to everyone involved, the entire creative team, and Bryan Q. Miller You, sir, are a joy and a delight.
You're a joy. You stop it. With your big sticker of your wife on the wall. You stop it.
Cannot thank you enough for joining me here on YouTube. And at any time you want, I say this to you all the time, but anytime you want to talk to me about Lower Decks, Star Trek, anything that is making Q happy, please come back and talk to me about it.
All right, we will do that.
And also follow him on Blue Sky.
Blue Sky.
He is a great, like I said, your comedy, your humor, the way that you inject everything is just, it is great. And also, he's got merch. He's got shirts. He's got a fantastic Stephanie Brown Batgirl shirt. I love it. I was going to be wearing it. I was going to try to surprise you for this, but it's actually in the mail right now. It hasn't arrived yet, but I'm going to leave a link down below to your great merch shop because, like I said, it's funny. All of the stuff, the humor is in everything that Q does.
I get my stupid little ideas, and then I got to barf them out somewhere. So
definitely check that out. And thank you, listener, viewer, watcher, everyone. Please come back again and join us. We have some great stuff coming up in the future. This year is the year of Superman, so we got a lot of super content coming. So leave a comment, like, notified, hit the subscribe bell, do all that stuff. But come back for another episode. Bryan Q. Miller is the best, and you are the best for watching.